Welcome back into the Dead Arm Sports Podcast. Josh and Jell here live on a Tuesday, the 13th. Good thing it's not a Friday. We are going to start off the show in lieu of a QOTD today. Some sad news that came out this morning. Mike Leach, Mississippi State head coach, passed away last night. He was transported to the hospital on Sunday for a heart condition and ended up not making it through. So I wanted to take a little bit of time here to talk about his legacy, any stories, anything that shouts out to you. Longtime coach at Texas Tech. After that, went over to Washington State and then back over to Mississippi State. Just had coaching jobs there. Some of the coaching tree, I mean, I saw this pop up in a tweet today that you just don't realize because he's very well known for the air raid offense, very great offensive innovator of the college game, very down to earth guy, tells it like it is, and always classic interviews and things that he did on the sidelines. But listen to some of these names from his coaching tree. So we got Lincoln Riley, Dave Aranda, Dana Holgerson, Sonny Cumbie, Seth Luttrell, Art Briles, Ken Wilson, Neil Brown, Josh Heupel, Eric Morris, Sonny Dykes, Cliff Kingsbury, Rufin McNeil. So, I mean, just some of the names right there. I mean, we're talking Sonny Dykes leading his TCU team to the college football playoff this year down in TCU. Lincoln Riley, obviously, over at USC. So some huge names there. Dave Aranda, former Badger D coordinator, now Baylor head coach, former LSU defensive coordinator too. So obviously thousands upon thousands of people that lives were touched from Mike Leach in a positive way, and one of the great head coaches out there that will be missed greatly.
Yeah, and Cliff Kingsbury, NFL head coach. So
former quarterback under Mike Leach.
Under Leach, and I believe Lincoln Riley was he was a
I think he was there too.
Yeah, he was there as well. Yeah, I mean, Mike Leach obviously, really became a big name head coach at Texas Tech during that season when he was able to lead Texas Tech to an 11-2 record and battling Texas back, when he had that team with Michael Crabtree, Garrett Graham, and he really put Texas Tech on the map for, it was a short period of time, but that forced everybody to really start paying attention. And obviously I'm just talking football right now, but I mean, it's crazy. The entire football world now at this point has adopted at least adopted bits and pieces of that air raid offense. And that spread, we've seen that spread offense, the spread offense back before, kind of when he was still coaching, the spread offense was more of still kind of a running game concept. It was spread everybody out, get your wide receivers out wide, get your tight ends out wide. But the spread offense before it turned into Mike Leach's air raid offense was still a running game concept, especially in the college game when, by opening up the field that way, it allowed the running back and the quarterback to run a lot more option plays with a lot more space. What Mike Leach brought was that spread offense, but adding in and really exploiting the defenses with the passing game. And that was really missing in the college game. We see those concepts now throughout all of college football, throughout the NFL, and, you could say really the NFL, when the Saints started putting Jimmy Graham out wide, that's a totally stolen concept that Sean McVay took from Mike Leach. So you've got Mike Leach concepts that or did I say McVay? I meant Sean Payton with the Saints was using in the NFL before anybody else was using it. So, I mean, his football concepts, yeah, I mean, you say that they've touched thousands of lives, thousands of coaches, but I think that his, just as big of an impact that he's made is, I mean, just on, just from a fan's perspective of somebody that I fell in love with that Texas Tech team with Crabtree because he ended up, because he made Texas Tech a legitimate program for those few years that he was there. But once you kind of start falling in love with the team, you start listening to the coach a little bit, and just his attitude with his it seemed like he just loved life. He loved his players a ton. He was, I was listening to a story this morning on another podcast, shout out to John Middlecoff, and he was saying that Mike Leach was just such a night owl, and he would go to the building. He would check in at noon, when most coaches would check in at 4, 5, 6 a.m. Coach Leach would check in at noon because he was such a night owl. He would set up coach meetings at 10, 11 at night, midnight, and start his meetings then. So he was just a different cat, but some of the stories that he would tell were just really, really touching. I mean, if you're a football fan, you've seen some of his post-game press conferences, you've heard some of them, and some of the stories that he would tell there. I was reading an article from the Players Tribune this morning, and he told a story about, as a child, they had a pet raccoon. And of course, Mike Leach growing up would have a pet raccoon. Nobody else would. But the way he told the story was honestly really touching. They adopted him when he was he's a wild baby raccoon that appeared to have lost his mother. They took him in, and this raccoon was very infatuated with shiny objects. So it would always climb up onto the kitchen counters, open up the cabinets, the cabinet doors, and bypass any object outside of the shiny silver pots and pans, and just stare at the pots and pans, and eventually knock them down onto the floor and just make noise with these shiny metal pots and pans. And it's like, the way that he told the story about how, raccoons have hands and feet like humans, and he felt a connection from that. And, after a while, once that raccoon turned a little bit more, got older and turned into an adult, him and his family noticed that it started getting a little bit more ornery, and like it just wanted to move out. And he said he felt like another just kind of like human connection. We've all been there. You turn 18. It's like you kind of want to just be done with with just having to deal with, God, I'm 18 or whatever. I don't want to live at home anymore. We've all been there. And he could kind of tell that that's where that raccoon was at. And so they went one night, dropped it off at, in the middle of the woods, basically. The raccoon walked about 10 yards out from the van and kind of looked back. And he said he felt, looked back at them almost to say, this is it. This is the end. Nice to know you. And, he felt another connection there. And he said there's just a lot that he just felt in this connection. And I feel like he's always been able to make this same, a similar connection with all of his players, all the people that he's known. Me, just as being a fan, I'm going to miss those types of stories. And it's like he was just one of the more genuine people out there, where he wouldn't BS the media. He wouldn't do the coach speak of, well, yep, got to play better next week, and genuine, the Dak Prescott quarterback speech that where he talks for 45 seconds and says nothing. He would talk genuinely, and it's one of those coaches that I feel like there's just been a pretty genuine connection with. For me, I think and a lot of you, Josh, I'm sure you maybe feel the same, where it's like there's just something different about him. And there's a reason that we've fallen in love with him. There's a reason that a lot of people are genuinely mourning today, not just because of the football stuff, but way more because of the personality and the person that he was, and just the way that he would talk about his players, his coaches, the community, and everything. So he's going to be deeply missed. And, getting the news back on, a few days back when the report came out that he had to be airlifted to the hospital, that alone sucked enough. But then to hear this morning, we're recording live on a Tuesday, that he ended up passing, just heartbreak from somebody that was really just, special in the entire football community and the entire sports community, really.
Yeah. No, one of the things I love too is one of the games that towards the end of this season, he was not happy with the way his team was playing. There's a viral video of him just going and folding up the chairs on the sidelines and letting them fall to the ground so that the players were able to sit down. And
I love that.
Things
just like a unique dude, man.
Yep. But yeah, RIP Mike Leach. So tough news there, but yeah, not much else to add. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. If you want to follow Gel, he can be found at DasGel. That's at DASJEL. I can be found at DasJPEC. That's at DASJPEC. You can send us in any questions there. Make sure you go to our YouTube page, type in Dead Arm Sports. Make sure you subscribe, click the bell there. That way you know when our live episodes drop, such as our Brian Noe interview. You can check that out. That occurred a little bit earlier on in the week, released on Monday. You can send us any questions. We monitor the chat during our live episodes. Otherwise, you can send them to at DasGel, at DasJPEC. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot and we'll get you some sticker swag sent out in the mail for free. A little bit slower time in the college game right now. Tomorrow we'll be doing a bowl preview episode, but most of the coach firings have happened right now. So we're going to talk about some of the coaches that might be on the hot seat going into 2023, just kind of hop around different programs and give some of our takes on who we think needs to perform next season. And Gel, I'll kick it over to you. Who's your first coach up on the hot seat?
Well, I got to start in the Big 12, and I got to go Coach Sark. I know that sounds unreasonable because he did improve that team this year, but I just, living here in Texas, I know how unreasonable Longhorns fans are. And I think that he had that 1 point loss to Alabama. That was one of the more impressive losses on the season, especially given that Quinn Ewers ended up having to leave the game, and he was able to lose that game 20-19 with Hudson Card out there. But he did have 3 other in-conference losses. One was to Texas Tech. That was in overtime. Lost to Oklahoma State, who we ended up finding out by year's end that they were kind of a phony, and then lost to TCU. But I think maybe the biggest, obviously not a loss here, I just named all the losses, but maybe the most damning win that he had was only beating Iowa State by 3. Iowa State they were a trash team this season. To only beat Iowa State by 3 and be in a genuine dogfight that entire time. You got to put that coaching job into question, because he may be a great play caller and a great offensive schemer and a great offensive coordinator, but a head coach's job is also to motivate these players. And when you're playing Iowa State, you have to go into that game and say, we are going to kick their ass and we are going to take names, just like TCU did. TCU came into that game against Iowa State as 10-point favorites, and they ended up blowing them out by 30 plus. That's what Texas should have done with that Iowa State team. They can't win by 3 there. So I think that I've always said that I think that Sark is a good offensive play caller, good offensive coordinator. I'm fine with him in that role. Head coach is just where I question him. And if he ends up finishing 3rd again in the Big 12 with 3 conference losses next year, those Longhorn boosters, those Longhorn fans, they are not going to be happy with that the finality of that season. And I think that they may be calling for Sark's name. They may give him one more year to be able to see, hey, we've got Arch Manning on the way, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean that seat's not going to be hot. And if they end up having a worse season next year, Arch is going to say, dude, I don't want this guy coaching me. The boosters those are the ones that are paying Arch. I don't think Arch is coming here for free. So they're going to want the number 1 guy that might be out there to coach Arch up. So I think Sark is, I'm not saying dead man walking, but if he has a bad season, maybe a dead man walking.
Yeah. Oh, like you touched on with Arch Manning coming in, there's going to be some extremely high expectations, not only for Quinn Ewers to take the next step next season, but for that following season and building upon the 2023 season for that 2024 season, when presumably Arch will be taking over the quarterback position in that program. I'm going to keep it in the state of Texas and move over to A&M and Jimbo Fisher. It's a hard contract to get out of, but high expectations with the number 1 recruiting class this last year. Got tons and tons of players transferring out and entering the portal. I think 19. Yeah, you had
19
said yesterday.
Have entered the portal, including his locker room weed smoking wide receiver Chris Marshall, who that's a 5-star guy. That's a 5-star kid. He'll have, I'm sure he'll have schools all across the country asking for him.
Yep. And 5-7 this year, missing a bowl game. I mean, that is absolutely unacceptable. And if that were to happen again next year, Texas A&M is another program with high expectations, playing in the SEC. They're proud bunch, and they are not going to take that lightly, especially with the recruiting classes that are coming in. And Jimbo really hasn't done a ton since he's taken over that program. Obviously, he won the national championship with Florida State, but ever since he came over, I feel like there's high expectations every year. He does not meet them, and eventually enough is going to be enough. And I just think his seat is extremely hot with a 5-7 finish this year.
Yeah, he's getting paid. I mean, he's getting paid so much that these boosters are going to say, screw it. It's not worth it. I mean, fine, we'll pay your buyout. I don't give a shit. Like, we brought you here to bring us to national championship, like expecting national championships, and they didn't even make a bowl game. What the hell is that?
Not great, Bob.
Not great, Bob. All right, I'm going to kick it over to the ACC. And this past season, Miami had an incoming head coach, Mario Cristobal, and the expectations were high. Cristobal, from Miami, you think, hey, he's going to be able to eat in the transfer portal, eat in this recruiting class. And they finished 3-5 in the conference, 5-7 overall, including a loss to Middle Tennessee State. They lost to Duke. Your boy called that one on the our DAS upset picks of the week. Holla at your boy. But I mean, Tyler Van Dyke, he looked like he could end up being a number 1 overall, or not number 1 overall, but potentially a first round pick at quarterback. He ends up getting, he had a horrible season. You're going to have massive turnover in terms of players leaving because they don't fit his scheme or they just don't like him as a coach. But hopefully you're going to have massive turnover, or I guess with that turnover, you're going to be able to bring in some of the players that fit kind of his attitude and his style of coaching, his scheme. So I'm fine giving him another year here, but if he has another 5-7 season, misses a bowl game for the second year in a row, loses 5 conference games, when you know that he's got more talent on that roster than freaking Duke, like that has to be a red flag. I know he's only going into his second year with that program, but scenario here, what if Deion lights it up at Colorado and you say, screw it, screw Mario, let's bring Deion over here, bring more Hurricane, bring back that swag that the Canes had back in the early 2000s, late 90s, when the Canes were at their peak, that program heyday. So if he has another rough year and Colorado balls out, if Miami goes after Deion, sorry, Mario, we have to make this change and we'll pay your buyout. Cause obviously there's mad money in Miami. So I don't know. Mario Cristobal, better performer, else he's going to be long gone in the ACC or in Miami.
Yeah. No, I agree completely with that. It'll be interesting to see if he has another year like he did this year, if they do make that coaching change. And again, it probably depends on who's out there and the hot name at the time to come over. But this seemed like the perfect marriage with Cristobal coming to his former team in Miami, coming over from Oregon, performed very well with the Oregon Ducks out in the Pac-12. So you thought, yeah, this should be a pretty easy transition. They started off pretty decent and then just kind of fell completely off. Tyler Van Dyke completely underperformed this year. He was somebody that we thought maybe they'd be going to New York. Speaking of which, shout out to Caleb Williams winning the Heisman this last weekend. But somebody we thought, but somebody we thought that could possibly be getting the call to go to New York with a turnaround there. But very, very disappointing. Again, we've seen that this year. I'm going to bring up another coach here in a second, the first year head coach, that you got to get out running with some of these first year head coaches, and you can't start off like this. I mean, you get a little bit more of a leash with it being your first year, but with that transfer portal now, we've seen what Lincoln Riley was able to do in USC. He turned USC into one game away from getting to a college football playoff. So there's no reason in today's day and age with college football that with the transfer portal the way it is, you should be able to be competitive, especially coming into a new program, especially one as prestigious as the Miami Hurricanes program.
For sure.
Moving back over to the Big 12, first-year head coach Will Venables of the Oklahoma Sooners. And this is a name that we had talked about. We didn't necessarily think he was going to get canned, but 6-6 first year, loses to West Virginia on the road, ugly loss there. And we've talked about him a ton, so I'll keep this one pretty short. But Oklahoma fans are not going to settle for another 500 season next year. They're going to need to see some major improvements. We'll see what he can do with a full recruiting cycle now, see if he's able to hit the transfer portal. They had Austin Stogner coming back over, transferred with Spencer Rattler to South Carolina, coming back over at the tight end position to Oklahoma. So at least you see some movement coming back to Oklahoma via the transfer portal, but definitely need to bring in some more talent there and right the ship, because again, 500 ball in Norman, that's not going to fly.
Not going to fly. Yeah. I guess let me switch it over to the Pac-12, and this is a conference that I think it felt like that conference is on a major rise. A lot of programs outperformed or improved or had really good seasons. We saw really nice performances from obviously USC taking that massive jump. Utah, Oregon State had a magnificent season. Oregon ended up having a really good season. So that conference, Washington too, conference came out of the, no, Arizona, shit. Yeah, they lost a number of games, but they showed a lot of promise. They were putting up major points. Arizona State already replaced their head coach. So Probably not going to go hot seat there, but one of the teams that I did not bring up, if you noticed, was UCLA and Chip Kelly. They ended up finishing 6-3 in the conference, 9-3 overall. But the reason I bring him up is because he's losing his 6-year starter, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I mean, their losses were to Oregon, USC, Arizona State. UCLA want to take another jump here. We saw progress with Chip. We're ready to take another jump. We've got all of California now to recruit for Big Ten play. I don't know if Chip's offense really necessarily works in the Big Ten. Maybe their offense plays well in the Big Ten, but their defense certainly does not. They play zero defense. And if the strategy, which has been pretty clear under Chip Kelly, is to try to outscore everybody, well, we saw how that ended up working out in the NFL. Can't just outscore everybody against bigger, way more physical bodies. And you're going to see way more physical bodies against Big Ten competition than you do typically in the Pac-12. So this season, with no Dorian Thompson-Robinson, I'm predicting UCLA takes a pretty major fall down, and they could end up finishing, maybe a 4-5 type of season in conference. If that happens while UCLA is prepping to go into the Big Ten, you have to think, hey, let's move off a Chip now. Let him go. Let's get somebody that's going to fit that Big Ten playing style a little bit better. So I think if Chip has a rough season, and I mean, seriously, if they went 6-3 in conference this year, losing DTR, it wouldn't shock me if they end up losing 2 more games without their 6-year starter in a Heisman candidate in DTR. So I think Chip's got a real good shot to be on the hot seat here.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he's able to get somebody to come in via the transfer portal. Kind of got that program back in a good spot right now, because like you said, it's been down in the dumps for quite some time. And Chip Kelly, since his Oregon days, has been very questionable with head coaching position too, and just no consistency there, like you saw when he was up in Eugene. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I could definitely see his name being on the hot seat, especially moving into the Big Ten and trying to make an adjustment there. I'll stick in the Pac-12. Another school that you didn't bring up is the Cal Golden Bears and Justin Wilcox. Justin Wilcox is currently 30-36 as the Cal head coach. Last bowl appearance for Cal is in 2019. 10 wins over their last 3 seasons. Granted, Cal isn't a huge, prestigious football powerhouse at all, but those results are not ideal for that program. And especially they're one of the schools that probably is in limbo when USC, UCLA moves over. Are they going to get a call from another conference? Are they going to continue to be in that Pac-12? Obviously, it's a great academic university, so a lot of likes there, at least for other programs and other conferences to maybe want to bring them along. But I mean, 10 wins over the last 3 seasons, 4 years removed from a bowl game, that's not ideal.
That's rough. I didn't realize it had been that long since he'd made a bowl. So yeah, that's a good call for sure. Former Badger though, taking shots.
Yep.
I'll jump into the Big Ten here, and I've got really 2 names here that I could go with, but I think the number 1 candidate to be on the hot seat right now is Mike Locksley at Maryland. Ended up finishing below 500 in the conference, 7-5 overall. All 5 of his losses were in conference play. They can recruit like crazy. I mean, you've got Tua's brother there. They've had multiple wide receivers. I don't remember his first name. I probably can't pronounce it.
Talia? Yeah, something like that.
Someone like Tayola. There's an apostrophe in there somewhere. Like, but yeah, another Tagovailoa. I mean, but to finish under 500 in this conference, which was pretty putrid this year. They did hang in there that one game with Michigan, but they recruit way better than a team that should be that should finish 4-5 in the conference, 7-5 overall. Multiple over the last few years, multiple first round wide receivers. They're going to have they'll have another probably first, second round wide receiver coming out this year. And it's like they've kind of shown some promise, but they've never broken through. And it's like, you got to be disappointed if you're a Maryland fan. Just based on the talent that they have, and kind of sometimes they look like they're great, or they could be great. They just never have reached their potential. And, after DJ Durkin was fired back in 2018 unceremoniously, Mike Locksley came in and took over. And I don't know I don't think Maryland ever did a really deep head coach candidate search. And I think that that's why he may be the next one out the door in the Big Ten, just because these boosters, the D or the AD, they're going to want to say, okay, let's do a full-time head coaching search here. And something they didn't really have an opportunity to do after all of DJ Durkin's, the recruiting violations that he committed and everything. So I think, unfortunately, Mike Locksley, he may be the one out.
Yeah, no, and Maryland, again, it's hard to compete in that Big Ten East, but still, I mean, you got to be competing that they're doing.
You got that whole Baltimore area,
which is a nice pipeline of players.
Yeah. So
yeah. I think my last one here, and then we can jump over into the NFL, is going back to the Big 12. And we talked about him a little bit earlier on in that Mike Leach coaching tree, and it's Neil Brown at West Virginia. Gets a big-time transfer over of JT Daniels this last season, and 5-7, JT Daniels out onto another team. So he's
what is this, team number
I know.
9 or 10?
Right, sure feels like it, but Neil Brown in his 4 seasons, 22-25, only 2 seasons out of the 4 so far bowl eligible. So West Virginia too used to be such a fun program to watch. I mean, you had the Geno Smith days there, and Pat Slayton, and just
Pat White, Steve Slayton.
Pat White, yeah, Steve Slayton. Just
that was just gold to watch.
So
every weekend.
They were a good team and a fun
Your
offense
boy,
to watch.
Kevin. Who's that receiver?
Oh, Kevin White.
White, your boy.
No, not my boy. But yeah, we'll see. They fired their athletic director earlier on a few weeks back, and you thought maybe that this was Neil Brown going to be getting fired too, but ends up hanging around. So he's definitely on the hot seat. Needs to turn it around next year.
Yeah, I agree. Especially bringing over a guy with like JT Daniels, former 5-star recruit. I get that 5-star recruits don't always mean jack squat, but there's a reason that he didn't start over Stetson Bennett at the end of the year for Georgia. But still, like, that's the best quarterback that they've had in a while. And to go below 500, not, at least in the conference, not acceptable.
Yep. Any other names you wanted to throw out there quick, Joe?
Good for me.
All right. On to NFL.
I'll throw in Ryan Day just for fun in case he loses to Michigan next year again. Right. 3 straight years. Just in case it happens, you can, I'll have bragging rights on that. That's all.
NFL Week 14 recap. Quite a few big games this last weekend. This should be a fun segment to talk about. And going to kick it over to you, Joe. I know you want to dive into the Monday Night Football game that happened last night, Arizona and New England.
Yeah, New England ends up stomping Arizona 27-13. Mac Jones gets all pissy after the game in his post-game presser saying, they keep throwing it short for whatever reason. Oh, hey, Mac, maybe take a clue. There's a reason they're throwing it short and underneath the entire time. Maybe because you don't have a good deep ball whatsoever. But New England ends up taking the W there by 14 points. But the big story of that game, obviously, is Kyler Murray going down. It was confirmed today, torn ACL, out for the season. You got to imagine even longer than that. You got to imagine probably into week 6, 7, 8, if not further into next year. Colt McCoy, get ready to hold down the fort. I believe he's on a 3-year contract, so good for him. But yeah, I guess, we've seen Kyler get injured I believe every season since he came into the league. We've seen Lamar over the last 2 seasons get hurt. He only played 12 games last year. He's missed the last 1 3/4 games this year. Over the last 2 games. He's expected to probably miss this upcoming week. Tyler Huntley also, by the way, got hurt. Another small running quarterback. Cam Newton, he only played till he was 32. He was only really relevant, at least, till he was about 32 years old. Russell Wilson seems like he's totally fallen off a cliff.
What?
Revelation. Obviously, we don't know about the Michael Vick situation, unfortunately, about how that career trajectory would have gone. Yeah. Don't need to get into that one too much, but I guess it brings me to what a lot of people are projecting as the number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. He's about 6 feet tall, weighs about what? Does he even weigh 200 pounds? I mean, he's a pretty small dude. Great arm talent. Reminds me a lot of Kyler. I mean, doesn't run around quite as much, and a little bit bigger, but still probably maybe 6 feet, maximum 200 pounds. Doubt he's even there. We've seen guys like Tua just get thrown around like a rag doll with these 6'4", 250-pound defensive linemen that also can run a 4.5 somehow. Look at Micah Parsons, for example. Those defensive players that are that athletic with that size are all across the league. And Tua's been hurt multiple times this year. He's been concussed twice, and he's been folded around. He's been folded like a piece of paper multiple times. So now Russ is dealing with a concussion because he was basically lifted, flipped over, and ended up landing straight on his head this past weekend. Kyler, small athlete. Lamar running around. Like, I guess more of my concern, and shit, dude, even Josh Allen, who's 6'6", we saw him do a helicopter running for a first down this past weekend against the Jets. I guess my concern is small athlete, Bryce Young, small athlete, and somebody that needs to use his legs. Do you think that immense talent, but there's a reason that a lot of these small runaround quarterbacks had never been picked up very high until basically Russell Wilson came around in the late 2000s, or was that early 2010s?
Yeah.
Does that, I mean,
I think
if you're a GM of one of these teams that, I mean, Houston, yes, Bryce is the biggest talent out there, but if you're the Texans against a relatively poor offensive line, don't you have to be a little bit concerned about taking a small dude there at 1? And I guess going forward for any of these quarterbacks that are extremely athletic, but maybe a little bit smaller in stature.
Yeah, you definitely need to get some protection around them. And we've seen that, like you said, I mean, you named off so many quarterbacks that have gotten hurt the last couple of years. And I think we've seen offenses get more two-dimensional where you have that quarterback that has the running ability. And we've seen some awesome offenses that are able to do that and be really prolific in the NFL and kind of revitalize it. But it also comes with the caveat that I feel like the shelf life for these quarterbacks is getting so much less too. And you're not guaranteed. I mean, you're never guaranteed to have your quarterback all season. There's fluke injuries that happen and other things too. But these quarterbacks aren't making it through the season. So you better have a good backup quarterback. And you just wonder down the road if you're going to start seeing a transition of some of these offenses back into more of the pocket passing quarterback. And the Bills utilize Josh Allen, like you said. He's a big dude, 6'6", just absolutely built. But you see it's starting to take a little bit of a toll on him. He's got arm injury that he's dealing with right now. You'd mentioned he got absolutely lit up trying to run this last week. And just the different concussions that some of the players are getting now. And the biggest thing with some of these young guys and small guys is you have to have protection for them. And you can't just be letting them just run wild all the time, because that's not going to be good for them long term. It's not going to be good for your program long term, good for the organization. You see the ACL injury from Kyler on the scrambling play that he was trying to get outside. But yeah, we've seen the injuries toll with Lamar. So yeah, I don't know if you're always going to have these dual threat quarterbacks that are coming out, and even some of the ones that are bigger bodied, you're still seeing it take a toll with that run game. And you just wonder if down the road, some of these offenses are going to transition and try and get back to more of the pocket passer that we've seen in the past.
Well, I mean, and that has to be part of the reservation from the Ravens standpoint on giving Lamar a 5-6 year fully guaranteed contract that he wants, is that because Lamar's got the ability to throw from the pocket, but he's not consistent. He's got a hell of an arm, but his biggest weapon is his threat to run. And if you take that away, which it has been taken, it hasn't been taken away to this point, but he's gone down twice over the last 2 years and missed time. It's hard to guarantee somebody like that $250 or $231 million that he wants guaranteed just to surpass Deshaun Watson for somebody that's not extremely precise in the pockets. I mean, shoot, dude. We even saw Caleb Williams once he hurt that ankle against Utah, how much less effective he was when he just had to be a pocket passer. I mean, Caleb's still a lock to go number one in next year's draft, the 2024 draft, I think. But we just saw how much that limited him. And I think it just has to be a red flag for anybody drafting one of these smaller running quarterbacks one overall, because Russell Wilson feels like an outlier. The fact that he got to 34 and now he's just completely falling off a cliff, like that's an outlier. We've never seen him hurt up until last season when he had a busted thumb, which that was on a freak play. But now we're seeing him getting kind of thrown around. He's lost a step, and we saw Cam Newton where he lost a step and he was never the player that he once was. So it's got to be a little bit of a red flag.
Yep. I want to kick it over to possibly one of the greatest performances ever in my lifetime. A gentleman who got cut by his former team and picked up and then played in an NFL game less than 48 hours after getting the playbook, leads his team at 98 yards down the field for a game-winning touchdown, and that's Baker Mayfield.
Hardly
Rams end up beating the Raiders in just an absolute epic game by Baker Mayfield to be able to lead a team down the field in the 2-minute offense and come away with a touchdown after not even being on that team 3 days prior. And as great of a performance as that is, I want to talk a little bit about the Raiders. And are we going to see some huge changes with this organization this offseason? Derek Carr, is he somebody that you think might be on the cutting block? And
chopping
also,
block for you YouTube viewers? That's what this is, the chopping block.
And also, is Josh McDaniels' job safe too? The Raiders have underperformed severely this year after not really losing a ton of pieces from their main team last year. Yes, we've run through their first round draft picks and everything the last few years, which have not panned out at all, but they've got a lot of solid pieces on that offense, and the defense isn't too shabby either, but they just are terrible.
I really don't know. Derek Carr threw, I believe, 21 passes that game. I mean, it's pretty damn clear that Josh McDaniels does not trust this dude. And that's why I think that he's on the chopping block, because they were only up, they were up 16-3 at one point, and they were up early. And once they were up early, they just completely took the foot off the gas. And if you've got a QB that you trust, that you don't think is going to throw picks, you just keep running that offense. You keep throwing the ball. You keep scoring and put this game out of reach. Up 16-3 against an NFL team, that game is not out of reach. They just they completely abandoned the Derek Carr passing game, because I'm assuming because Josh McDaniels was that afraid of Derek Carr throwing a pick, which, I mean, quite fairly of McDaniels, he's been prone to throw really untimely picks. And, an interception in your own territory, that's what allows teams to get back into games quickly. So I think Derek Carr is more on the chopping block than Josh McDaniels. What's disheartening about that Raiders team, we did see some progress out of them. They had won 3 straight games. They were on their way to win a 4th straight and keep their name in that playoff picture. But after this loss, it kind of feels like they're out of the playoff picture. I think McDaniels is safe for another season, but I think Carr is probably the one that's most likely to go. Whether that's one of the 2 New York teams, that could be, you could throw in Houston there if they wanted a bridge quarterback.
Tampa Bay.
Hey, maybe a direct swap. Carr for Tom. I mean, Tom goes back to team up with Josh McDaniels. Like that McDaniels offense is basically the Tom Brady offense at this point. So maybe you see just a direct swap there. But yeah, I think it's more of a Derek Carr problem than Josh McDaniels not trusting Derek Carr than McDaniels being on the hot seat. All right, let me bring it over to the New York Giants. They just got completely smoked by the Eagles, fighting their ass off to try to get a playoff spot here. End up getting smoked 48-22 by the Philadelphia Eagles. I think it's pretty easy to say right now the Eagles are the best team in football. Who knows when the playoffs come around? Who do I trust more? Hurts or Mahomes? I mean, let's be honest. So if that ends up being the Super Bowl, it's going to be hard to go against the Chiefs. But right now, the way that the Eagles are playing, they are the number 1 team in the NFL. But I feel like the Giants at this point are totally cooked. They had a really nice start to the season, but feels like they're done. But they've got some decisions that they've got to make on their top 2 offensive players this season, if you want to call Daniel Jones one of their top 2 offensive players. Daniel Jones, they declined his 5th-year option. He's due to be a free agent this upcoming season. And Saquon, his 5th-year option is going to be up. And he's due to be a free agent. What do you see what the Giants will end up doing with both Saquon and Daniel Jones?
They're definitely going to be in the market for a quarterback. I mean, Daniel Jones, it's hard because you can't really fault him because the wide receivers that he's had to work with a lot are not guys that would be a 1 or a 2 on a lot of other teams in the NFL. So he's kind of
what about Tony Baloney?
Yeah, exactly. Who's the Chief?
Facts. Not before that.
But Brian Dable is going to want somebody to come in, run his offense that he had in Buffalo with Josh Allen there. And like you said, maybe they're a candidate for Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, somebody along those lines, a bridge quarterback, because they're not going to have a high pick in the draft. And then Saquon's interesting too. He's been banged up the last couple of years, has had quite a lot better season this year, stayed relatively healthy. So, but he's going to want a lot of money. I mean, he's hitting his first contract outside of his rookie contract, and he's going to want to get paid. And you don't see a ton of running backs bring back the value with what their contract is in that second contract. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know if they're necessarily ready for a complete rebuild. So I would imagine he'll probably get franchise tags. I don't know that they're going to give him a long-term contract. So we'll see what he ends up wanting to do with that, and if he ends up holding out or anything like that. But I think ultimately the Giants, you have to bring in somebody that's going to compete with Daniel Jones, maybe be a bridge quarterback for somebody else, maybe get a better pick down the road. And Saquon, I think, will ultimately be back there on a short deal with a franchise tag.
I love the bridge quarterback idea with Derek Carr. He's got, after this season, his dead cap money is pretty minimal. So the Raiders can cut him really with, I mean, they're going to have to eat 5.6 mil on the in dead cap money. That's nothing, especially from what we've seen from Matt Ryan, Carson Wentz nearing $30 million over the last couple of years. So if they can, I would love for the Giants bring in Derek Carr, draft somebody at maybe they end up drafting in that 11 to 15 ish range. I'd bet that's where the Giants end up falling, maybe 16, 17, if they end up mistakenly winning some games. Grab yourself an Anthony Richardson type, maybe a little bit more of a project, 2-year project. Let Derek Carr take over for the next 2 years. Give him, 35 a year. Sign him for that, and then you transition over to Anthony Richards, or to that project quarterback after 2 years. Franchise tag Saquon. I think that's the perfect move as well.
Yeah, maybe even if another quarterback prospect slips up a little bit, they try and trade up and get a comp to Josh Allen and Will Levis, and big-bodied guy, and maybe he fits into Brian Daboll.
Not sure Levis has that mobility that Josh Allen has, though.
Yeah, not as much, but
just a big body, though. You're right.
Yep.
And a project.
Yes, definitely a project. Who likes mayo on his coffee?
and eating rotten bananas with the peels on.
Yes. I'm going to move it down to your neck of the woods, Gel, in the Battle of Tejas down in the Big D this last weekend. And that is the Cowboys needing a last-minute drive to beat the lowly Texans, who are 1-11-1. And the Cowboys, one of the better teams, air quotes, better teams in football, sneaking out a victory here. But is this something to watch, do you think, with this Cowboys team? Is this cause for concern? Is this just kind of a one-off? I mean, Texans, this essentially was their Super Bowl, playing the Dallas Cowboys, and a lost season for them. But it's kind of concerning. Dallas's offense really wasn't getting much going outside of the run game. Dak had
outside of Tony Pollard's run game.
Pollard, yeah, Zeke punched in a touchdown at the end of the game. By the way, you have a beer chug bet will be settling at some point in time down the road from that one.
Oh, yikes. That's right.
But no, outside of that, the defense was okay. Still not what we've seen from the Cowboys some of the weeks this season, just very inconsistent. But is this cause for concern, or is this just kind of a blip in the schedule?
It's not a cause for concern, I don't think. The Cowboys play, I think that they saw, hey, we're 17.5-point favorites here. I think they played down to their competition. And I think the Texans also played way up to their competition. The Texans they did not play well, and they still led most of that game. But I think that, especially offensively, God, that Texans offense is just miserable. But I think that it was more of the Cowboys playing down to their competition, which that's a shitty coaching job by Mike McCarthy. He's still got to be motivating these players. But these players also still, these players still know those spreads every time you turn on the TV, whether it's NFL Network, ESPN, Fox Sports, you just see the bottom line, and now the spread is right next to your game. So every Cowboys player knew about that spread, and they're like, oh, God, we're going to walk right past these guys. We just blew out the Colts 54-14 or whatever the hell that final was the other day. We've been on a nice roll. Like, we're going to walk right past these guys, and it's still the NFL. These are all still professional players. So I think that it was more of a, like I said, I think it was more of a thing of the Cowboys playing down to their competition, the Texans playing up to their competition, in-state rivalry as well. So, quote unquote rivalry, the Cowboys have wrecked that quote unquote rivalry, but I think it's more of that than anything for me. I don't have much for concern about the Cowboys. And when the Cowboys did need to turn it on at the end of the game, they did. And they made a really big defensive stop. And then they finish it off with a touchdown drive. So I'm not too concerned about the Cowboys.
And they're getting a reinforcement in wide receiver coming in, and it is not Odell Beckham Jr. It is T.Y. Hilton. Shocking, but more so they brought in OBJ. The Giants brought in OBJ to take a look at him, and teams were really concerned with his medical report. And it was rumored that he probably wasn't even going to be ready until towards the back end of the playoffs. So, and he pretty much came out the other day too and said that, I'm fine just playing in the playoffs this year. So obviously cause for concern there. There's a lot of rumors that he might help that Cowboys team get that offense over the hump and get to that next level, but obviously not happening there with the T.Y. Hilton signing.
Yeah. I think just as big of a cause for concern, though, was just his attitude about what he said about playing in the playoffs. And he said, I've been playing football for a long time, and, I think that I could come in the regular season, but I don't see the point. And I think that I could just come in the playoffs right away and play then. And I think that's got to be a major cause for concern in terms of attitude, because these are all these teams that were looking at signing him, the Giants, the Cowboys, the Bills. All three of those teams brought him in for workouts and team meetings. He didn't run for them, at least in pads. He wasn't running routes with them. It was more of just a verbal conversation. And for him to then come out and say publicly he doesn't feel like he needs to play in the regular season, these teams are fighting for playoff spots and they're fighting for seeding. No, if you say I'm still trying to get to 100%, and once it looks like 100, when I'll get to 100% would be the playoffs, and then once I'm there, I'm ready to go. If he would have said that, that's a completely different statement than I don't feel like I need to play in the regular season. That's asinine. That's an asinine mentality for a player that's, I believe, nearing 30, if not already 30. He's had 2 ACLs. He's had, attitude issues in his past. And now now the attitude issue kind of seems like it's coming out again. So I think that was a complete miss by Odell if he wants to get signed, and it looks like he's not going to. Like you mentioned, T.Y. Hilton signed by the Cowboys. Who's the other? We saw a receiver get signed by the Bills. Oh, Cole Beasley came back to the Bills. That's kind of a bit of a joke, but that's, I think more than anything, that's the Bills saying, no, we're not signing you, Odell. Mm-hmm. We're bringing back Cole Beasley, if that tells you anything. So I think he's done for the season, and I wonder what his offseason prospects are going to be, because I don't think any GMs that value their job are going to want to bring in a headache if they think that he's going to be a headache like this. And he's certainly not going to be getting any sort of long-term deal coming off of his second ACL.
Yeah. Got time for one more, Gel. Do you have any other NFL takeaways from this last weekend you want to throw up?
I guess just one really quick San Fran Tampa Bay game. I don't need to get into the game too much, but Brock Purdy looked like freaking awesome. I wonder if, Jimmy G, is this a little bit of an indictment on him? Because Purdy, as Mr. Irrelevant, looks just as good as Jimmy G did. Maybe there's a reason why the Niners did end up drafting Trey Lance and giving up all those picks that they did to get off of Jimmy G.
Yeah, I think Mike Shanahan's system or Kyle Shanahan's system is just one that, as long as you're not turning the ball over, that's fine. And you can win games, you can be competitive. And that's what Brock Purdy's doing. Is he's got a nice ball. He's been fairly accurate. He's hitting his receivers and doing what he can to help the team out and not trying to overdo it and make turnovers and force it. So I think that's essentially what the 49ers need. And we've seen that working right now. Now he's going to have a tough road test this week going up to Seattle on a Thursday night. So we'll see what his performance looks like there. But no, solid start for Mr. Irrelevant. One more, I guess, quick I wanted to throw over to you, and that is Detroit knocked off the Minnesota Vikings. Can the Lions make the playoffs? They're sitting right now, I think, 1 or 2 games back. They have games against the Jets, Carolina, Chicago, and Green Bay. So need a little work to do there, but Detroit is actually a fun team to watch with that offense. Just need the defense to be semi.
If they show, if that defense shows up at all, they've got a shot in all those games. And if they run the table, the Giants are out. You don't know what's going on with Washington and Tyler Heineken. Like, do you trust Heineke? I don't.
Nope.
So, they were 3-point favorites this week against Minnesota, and they ended up winning by 11 against the number 2 team in the NFC that had been lighting up a number of teams. So, I certainly, I know I'm rooting for the Lions to finish the job and make the playoffs and watch that Dan Campbell celebration. I'm rooting for them. I don't know if they're gonna make it, but I'm rooting for it.
Yeah, will be interesting and fun to see what happens down the stretch. We can be found at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter, Instagram. Check us out on Facebook at Dead Arm Sports. Go to YouTube, type in Dead Arm Sports, subscribe, click the bell. That way you know when our live episodes drop. We monitor that chat so that way you can ask us any questions. If you miss out on asking us questions there, Gel can be found at DOS Gel. I can be found at DOS JPEG. You can send us in any questions there. Again, I said something at the beginning of the show, but make sure you go back to our Monday episode. If you haven't listened to it, we interviewed Fox Sports Radio host Brian Noe, and a pretty solid interview there. Subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite listening platform. Send us a screenshot. We'll get you some swag sent out. What are those platforms, Joe?
Hit us up on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Pods. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review to whatever your chosen listening platform is. Take a screenshot of that written review, send it to us on our socials at Dead Arm Sports, Twitter or Instagram, and we will swag you out with some free goodies. Also, make sure to, as Josh mentioned, find us on YouTube, searching Dead Arm Sports, and make sure to subscribe, rate, and subscribe there.
All right, so that will wrap up this episode. I appreciate everybody out there listening. We'll be back tomorrow with Bowl Pick'em. So we've got about 13 bowl games to go through over the next week. Get our winners there. We'll talk about that fun game we're going to be playing there with that. Preview the NFL Week 15 slate and, of course, our Drew Lock. So tune in tomorrow, and everyone have a great night. Joe, close her out.
Brian No Faux Show.